We interrupt this incredibly awesome music to bring you some incredibly awesome political talk on Damn Radio.
Hello, good evening, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. Thank you for joining me this evening from the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Arts Studio. If you choose to call in tonight, you may do so 573-746-8020. I've had a bit of allergies getting me today, so I got kind of frog in the throat sort of thing going. Sorry about that. But I had a very good, very interesting day today. Sounds like I'm going to be under the weather, but I'm not. I feel pretty good. I got on the Katy Trail today here in Missouri, and I bicycled 35 and a half miles, something like that. It was entertaining. I liked it. It was enjoyable. It was a beautiful day for it, and it was well worth the trip. So for our deep dive today, I had talked Thursday, and we had a long show and a decent amount of discussion about what was going on at the Valdai discussion club, which Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin gave a presentation almost an hour long, like 54 minutes, and I got through about half of it for you, and we had some commentary on it. But what I thought I would do today, because I made a few comments about Nebenzya and his appearance at the UN Security Council, saying what Russia intends to do as the president of the Security Council this time. And there was question answer period afterward that went pretty far, and everybody knows that I think that we, the United States, have screwed up dramatically over the last 30 years. And most of what we've screwed up in has to do with Russia. When Vladimir Putin gave his speech at Valdai last Wednesday, Thursday, whatever day that was, and I'm going to go over some of it again today, he pointed out a couple of things. He goes, look, you realize the USSR tried to join NATO one year, way back before, he was alive even, well, he was probably alive. I don't know. He said in the 50s sometime that they tried, and that he personally spoke to Bill Clinton about it. And that Bill Clinton said it was, I told you about that the other day. It's nerealna, and that word means unrealistic, basically. And so first he said that he seemed, that sounds like a good idea. I wonder why not. And then he went and by that evening he had come back and he had spoken to some of his deep state, probably, who said, oh, no. How can we have Russia in NATO? Oh, geez, who are we going to have as an enemy? And he changed his tune and said it's nerealna and not realistic for Russia to want to join NATO. And he called for, during his speech, he called for some massive changes. And he said, we need a different focus. What have I been saying all along? We need, of course, he's Vladimir Vladimirovich, and I'm just plain old Sam. Plain old ordinary Sam, just hanging out here having a show. But that doesn't mean I'm not right. And what needs to happen is that we need to change our way of thinking. Everything that they present, this Valdai discussion, and I had a chance while riding my bicycle today. The ride took me just under 3 hours to do it all, with all stops and all that other crap. Stopping 2-3 times on the road for about 5-10 minutes each time. Drinking some water, getting some hydration, but the entire time I was listening to the nearly 4-hour presentation, and I have now heard all of it. When I was talking to you last Thursday about it, I had only been able to listen to his speech and a few of the questions, and I wanted to share that speech with you. But now I've heard the whole thing, all the questions direct, and there were some very interesting things that he talked about, and one of them has to do with he talked about how sad it is what is happening on the front. And he gave some numbers. He was like, listen, and hopefully I get to them and get the exact numbers that he was talking about, because I am going to go through his question and answer period. But it was, here you are on the front lines, and the unfortunate part, and he was talking about how many last month, he said, just last month. And he was talking about since the first of the year and then last month. He said that last month, between desertions, death, and those injured so badly they would not return, that Ukraine lost 46,000 soldiers in a month. Okay, he said these are the numbers that we know. He said, now, they have mobilized. He said, and he was pointing out that the attrition rate for them is horrific, and they cannot fill them. They cannot fill the spaces. He goes, no matter how much the United States or the West gives them in weapons, it doesn't do any good if there's nobody left to handle them. And he said that's unfortunately what's happening. He said by the time they mobilized and the people that were able to come back to work, that were cycled through, got their medical treatment, and were sent back to the front, he said that there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 33 or possibly 34,000 that were sent back to the front. And he said, but remember, there's nobody left to train. They can't. Their training is being done in other parts of Europe, like by the Germans, by the French, by everybody else. And he said when they bring them back, they get 2-3 weeks of training, and they're just unprepared. That they come and they all die. They surrender. They run off. They scarbor off, and off they go. And they are losing, by those numbers, they're losing 12,000 a month. And their nearly 1 million-man army that they build up exactly for this purpose with the help of the West is decimated. And they have nobody to continue this. And, he was talking about a couple of questions about how Kellogg and a couple other Westerners were saying that Ukraine is winning. He said, well, that's nonsense, and it just completely is. I mean, it's really nonsense. I'm sitting there going, where in the world is this guy getting his info? The guy is selling something, and you wonder if he believes it himself. But anyway, I will get back to Putin, but what I thought I would do tonight would be to start with Nebenzya and his press conference, because his press conference it lasted for 54 minutes. He gave a little bit of detail about what they were going to do during the term of their presidency, and it is well worth the listen, because as I've always said, you need to get the news straight from the horse's mouth, if at all possible, because the days of getting truth from U.S. media, or frankly from any media, those days are gone. You don't get truth from them. They spin their lies and politicize everything and turn it this way and turn it that way. And so, but I thought that instead that I would, since we heard most of, we heard quite a bit of Vladimir Vladimirovich on Thursday, I would start with Nebenzya. And what I thought I would do is when the questions stop, at the end of each of his questions, I will make a comment, because there's a question that is asked of him and his response. All of this was in English, and so it's really nice. And then do a kind of an analysis of it after after he speaks and he gives his response, and tell you what I think of that, because I've had a bit of time to analyze this stuff. So let's try without any further ado to see what Mr. Nebenzya has to say at the UN Security Council October 25 press conference regarding Russia's presidency of the UN Security Council. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the press conference of the permanent representative of the Russian Federation, His Excellency Vasily Nebenzya, on the occasion of the Russia's presidency of the Security Council. Ambassador will start with the program of work, and then we'll be glad to answer your questions. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. We had a presidential breakfast this morning, and about 20 minutes ago we adopted the program for October, and I would like to brief you on what will happen in October under our presidency. The Council's agenda for October is very packed, and it's most of the time the case with other presidencies as well. The reason for it is a mandate cycle, as we call it, the reports of the Secretary General that need to be discussed, and the resolutions on the respective mandates that should be adopted. This October, the UN Security Council will also travel to Addis Ababa to hold annual joint consultative meeting with members of the African Union Peace and Security Council. That's, an alternating event. This time it's the African Union that hosts that meeting. The two councils are expected to discuss the issues of mutual interest related to the regional agenda, and we, as Russia, are honored to be leading the UN Security Council to Addis, together with our co-leads, Somalia. We attach particular importance to the meeting with the AU Peace and Security Council and overall engagement with the African Union and African countries, both nationally and in our presidential capacity. As you may have heard, a new department in the Foreign Ministry on partnerships with Africa has been established recently in the Russian Foreign Ministry. This shows our commitment to strengthening even further our ties with African friends, which are historically very close. So clearly the visit to Addis will be the highlight of our presidency. Another two highlights will be our signature events. The first one will be on October 23rd, an open debate on the Middle East. It is a mandated quarterly meeting, but we have plans to elevate its level. The unfolding catastrophe in Gaza will be in the focus of the Council's attention this day, and we expect Deputy Special Coordinator Ramiz Alakbarov to brief the Council. On October 24th, we celebrate the United Nations Day, the 80th anniversary of the day when the UN Charter entered into force. We plan to celebrate it in the Council by an open debate, which will be an opportunity to reaffirm that the United Nations is not a relic of the past, but a unique and indispensable adaptable mechanism for addressing most pressing challenges of the present and the future. The title of the meeting is UN Looking into the Future. We plan to land the debate around several key issues, such as strict implementation of the principles of the UN Charter in their entirety and interconnectedness, restoring confidence in the organization and long-term vision for the future. We expect the Secretary General to brief the Council. We already see much interest among the Member States for this meeting and hope that it will be an engaging and timely exchange. Another highlight, we will hold an open debate on women, peace and security on October the 6th. As you may know, it is the 25th anniversary of the UN Security Council seminal resolution 1325. Technically speaking, it is a mandated meeting rather than a signature event, but it will definitely be in the limelight since the topic is very relevant. You know how packed is the Security Council chamber when this issue is being discussed. And you should recall, and I would remind those who forgot, that the Soviet Union pioneered the women's agenda more than 100 years ago, promoting equal rights for women, while in the West they had to struggle for another several decades about it. We expect the Secretary General to brief the Council for this open debate. We also plan to invite two women civil society briefers to share their experiences on the matter at hand, and we will share their names soon. And I can assure you, you won't be disappointed to hear them. Turning to other mandated meetings. After the UN floating holiday tomorrow, we will start our deliberations on October 3rd with a briefing and consultations on Colombia with the new SRSG there, whom you all know very well, Miroslav Yencha. He will present the Secretary General's report. On October 7th, we have a briefing on cooperation between the UN and the African Union. SRSG Parfait Ananga Anyanga will present the report of the Secretary General. We also expect AU Commissioner for Political Affairs and Peace and Security Bankole Adeoye and ASG Marta Pobi to brief the Council. On October 8th, we plan to hold a private meeting on Somalia and Al-Shabaab sanctions. We expect to hear briefings from SRSG James Swan, AU Commission Special Representative El Hadji Diene, as well as from my colleague from Panama, Ambassador Lo Alfaro de Alba, in his capacity as chair of the 2713 Committee. October 9th will be fully devoted to the Middle East. In the morning, we have consultations on Yemen with Special Envoy Hans Grunberg and OCHA representative as briefers. In the afternoon, the consultations on the United Nations Disengagement Observer Force will take place. On October 10th, we will have consultations on MINURSO, which is Western Sahara, with both personal envoy Staffan de Mistura and SRSG Alexander Ivanko briefing the Council. The week starting from October 13th is mostly reserved for the Council's visit to Addis to hold annual joint consultative meeting with the members of the African Union Peace and Security Council, as I said. They will take place on 16th and 17th of October in Addis. Before that, on October 13th in the morning, we are planning to hold a briefing and consultations on Great Lakes region, where Special Envoy Juan Xia will present SG report. After lunch on the same day, consultations on the implementation of Resolution 1559 on Lebanon are scheduled. On October 14th, a briefing and consultations on UNSMIL, UN support mission in Libya, are scheduled with SRSG Hannah Tete as a briefer. This meeting will be hopefully preceded by adoption of the resolution on Haiti sanctions. The third full week of the month will start for the Council on Tuesday, September 21st, with a briefing on UNMIC, UN Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo. Deputy SRSG Mirbert Donjun Shin will present the Secretary General's report. TCC meeting on MINUSCA, which is Central African Republic mission, is scheduled in the afternoon. October 22nd in the morning, we will have a briefing and consultations on political and humanitarian aspects of the situation in Syria with Najat Rojdi, Deputy Special Envoy. The briefing in the afternoon, a briefing and consultations on Haiti will take place, and the new SRSG there, whom you also know very well, Carlos Ruiz Macio, will present the report of the Secretary General. As you may be aware, the week starting on October 27th is the International Law Week. So a traditional private meeting is scheduled on October 29th to hear a briefing by the ICJ President Yuji Iwasawa. No meetings of the Council are scheduled for October 27th, as we intend to use this day for the spillovers of the two open debates, namely on the Middle East and the UN anniversary. On October 28th, we will have a briefing and consultations on MINUSCA, which is a UN multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission on CAR, where SRSG Valentin Rugvabiza will present the Secretary General's report. On October 29th, we tentatively plan the adoption of two resolutions on the mandate of MINURSA, which is the mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, and UNVMC, which is the UN verification mission in Colombia. But the actual timeline will, of course, depend on the pen holders. On the last day of our presidency, October 31st, we have scheduled the adoption of the resolution on the authorization of the EUFOR Althea force in Bosnia and Herzegovina, followed by a debate on the same topic. As for the informal wrap-up, the so-called Toledo formula, we are planning to do it on the last day of our presidency, October 31st. As for the working methods, they have remained unchanged for the last 80 years. You know that the Russian presidency is all about following the procedure, enforcing the efficiency, if needed, of course. And we will not hesitate to restore the order in the chamber and demand that delegations respect decorum. So that's it, dear colleagues. I'm ready for your questions or comments.
Thank you, Ambassador. The first question, Valeria, Rebecca, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for the press briefing. And on behalf of ANCA, we wish you the best of luck for the busy month ahead. It's Valeria Rebecca from ANSA Newswire. So my question is on Iran. There's nothing on the Council schedule yet, but do you plan, informal consultation, or do you see the chance of more diplomatic discussion on the JCPOA and to avoid the return of the sanction? Thank you so much.
Our Western colleagues who initiated the so-called snapback, the legitimacy of which we do not recognize, they keep saying that they are open for diplomatic solutions, although they forfeited a diplomatic solution already by initiating an illegal procedure, being serial violators of 2231, by reintroducing sanctions on the transition day of 2023 when some of them expired. You know that Russia and China offered to extend the time of the resolution 2231 to give diplomacy a chance, which they basically killed. We do not recognize the snapback as coming into force. We wrote a letter on the eve of Friday and on Saturday, signed by Minister Lavrov, addressed to the first letter was a joint letter by the foreign ministers of Iran, China and Russia. The last one I'm referring to, which is of Saturday, it was a letter signed by Minister Lavrov addressed to the Secretary General, advising and warning him not to rush with the implementation of the illegal snapback, not to re-establish the sanctions committee, and not to introduce sanctions that allegedly have been reintroduced. So we'll be living in two parallel realities, because for some snapback happened, for us it didn't. That creates a problem. How we will get out of it, let's see. Today we did not discuss it extensively during the presidential breakfast, but the matter was invoked, I would put it that way. We are not, frankly, happy that the Secretary General rushed to implement the resolution, which has obvious legal flaws, which we were stressing all the time.
Hi, Ambassador Xu Dechi with China Central Television. First, wish you a successful month.
Well, I wanted to take a break there because there's something about clean hands. Okay, so if you start it's a legal theory basically. So if you, for example, have a contract with your friend to buy his car, and then you don't give him the money, and then you still want the car, and you go, well, I'm going to sue you. You got to give me the car. You said you were going to, give it to me, and you don't exchange the money. This is an idiotic scenario, but it's easy. Okay, so he doesn't give you the money, but he still thinks he wants the car. It is unclean hands, is the doctrine that says in the law that if you don't follow the rules, you don't do your part, you can't very well complain that somebody didn't do their part. So you have to have clean hands. You can't come before the court with dirty hands and then expect them to grant you relief. So that's a defense. And what this snapback procedure, he's saying the West, as usual, didn't follow the procedures. He says they are serial violators of the rules, that the rules just don't apply to them. They are applicable to everyone else, but not to them. So let's see. They say there's no legal basis to reintroduce the sanctions against Iran, and they all expired. So that's part of the news this week that they've been talking about. And if the Euro Troika broke 2231, then they don't get to come back through snapback. And so Moscow says they have no legal basis, and any secretariat, the secretariat that reestablishes these sanctions are really poking holes in UN credibility. That's what's happening. So let's go on to the second question.
We also noticed that in the program of work, there are no meetings concerning the Ukrainian issue. As the president of Security Council, how are you planning to push solve this issue within this month?
First of all, congratulations on the 76th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China, which happens exactly today. Today at the presidential breakfast, a number of delegations, you guess which, raised the issue, saying that they might be asking for a meeting on Ukraine. We are fair presidency. If that request will come in due form, we will accommodate it, of course.
Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Well, I want to comment a little bit on the Ukraine thing because I think that's pretty funny. He says, Russia, we're going to be fair. If somebody formally requests a Ukraine meeting, it will be accommodated. Well, last week during the General Assembly, everybody was pumping Ukraine and throwing more stuff out there. And old Z-Monster came and spoke to everybody. They even tried to get some kind of a resolution about Russia being the bad guy, to get all that set up and have Zelensky be able to, I don't know, they even want to change the rules so there aren't something to override the veto. And basically, he says, he's telling everybody, look, process over theater. You want something, want a session, fine. Bring it up properly with the right paperwork and no more grandstanding, just by bringing in your trained monkeys, And so, I mean, that's not what exactly he said, but he's like, somebody wants to talk about it. We'll come and talk about it. We'll be happy to talk about it.
Alexey Alexeyev, RIA Novosti, and good luck for this busy month. You've mentioned two signature events on 23rd and 24th of October. Should we expect Foreign Minister Lavrov to attend those meetings?
That's what we are anticipating. That has not yet been confirmed, but we are looking forward to his participation, and hopefully that will be the case.
Yeah, they'll want a heavyweight there at that time, and they're gonna want him there because of Gaza and the UN 80 thing and anything that comes up related to Bosnia or Kosovo. They're going to want him there if at all possible. So let's see. There's another question on Iran. This is where he gets into some of these things.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A follow-up on Iran first. Does that mean that Russia will not impose any sanctions or recognize the imposition of sanctions and just keep its current pre-snapback dealings with Iran? And do you foresee any future, possibly soon, discussions among the 5 remaining JCPOA members on this issue and also, of course, with Iran?
As I said, for us, snapback did not happen. For us, Resolution 2231 expires 18th of October 2025, as it was envisaged to expire. And that is the answer to your first question. And secondly, you know that, in fact, Iran was in intensive consultations with the Euro-Troika before they came with their draft that passed on Friday. And they were very close to a deal, but then they were told by a certain former participant of the JCPOA, from whom the whole thing started. The first initial original sin was committed by that country in 2018, if you remember it. They told no, and the Europeans said yes, sir, and everything collapsed. Now they keep saying that we're ready to continue dialogue and look for the political solution, but frankly, they they demonstrated that they are just cronies and proxies of a country who decides everything. They do not decide it. We are looking forward to direct negotiations, direct, indirect, whatever, those that will bring a result anyway, with the United States. As far as we know, such dialogue is not in effect at this time. What will happen, we don't know, but we were saying that this development is really fraught with a major escalation around Iran, because it opens the door for those countries who want to finish Iran's nuclear program, which they didn't finish on June 12th, and that is again another destabilizing factor in the Middle East, which is already in a very bad shape.
A quick follow-up. You're clearly referring to the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA, which happened in 2018. When you say that snapback is basically illegal, can you explain to us again Russia's reasoning? Is it because of the U.S. withdrawal?
Not because of the U.S. withdrawal. U.S. withdrawal happened in 2018, and for the whole year, Iran continued to implement Resolution 2231 and the provisions of the JCPOA fully, saying that they wait for the U.S. to come back to the original participants of the JCPOA. Then Iran started to make its own moves, stressing all the time that it's all reversible, provided the violator will fulfill its commitments. Now, U.S. could not invoke snapback because they are not members of the agreement anymore. Who did is the Euro-Troika. They claim, in the resolution there is a provision on the so-called dispute resolution mechanism, which they claim they invoked, which they never did. In fact, they never did. They said that they performed every act of diplomacy to convince Iran to abide, offering it the best solutions they could offer. We know what these offers were, and they were not worth anything that was acceptable to Iran, and we understood it fully. They did not invoke the dispute resolution mechanism. After certain provisions of the resolution expired on 18th of October 2023, lifting sanctions on Iran on certain provisions, the European countries reintroduced them in their national jurisdictions, as well as, if I'm not mistaken, by the EU itself, thus violating the resolution de facto. And now they claim that they did everything they could, and that's why they're invoking snapback. For us, dispute resolution mechanism was never involved. The fact that they reintroduced the same sanctions that were lifted deprives them of the right to invoke any snapback. There is, that in jurisprudence there is this doctrine of clean hands and pacta sunt servanda. The violator of the provisions of a certain legal agreement deprives itself of a right to use mechanisms that are provided for in the document that they're referring to, since they are violating it fully themselves. You asked also whether the idea of the original participants of the JCPOA is somewhere on the horizon. I wouldn't say so. The Euro-Troika is not very much eager to talk in this format, not only with us but with China as well, and that is explicable to us. Besides our political problems in other areas, because they know who is calling the shots, and the U.S. is calling the shots, and they listen to them and catch every hint or word that may come from the U.S. administration.
JCPOA JCPOA stands for Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and the U.S. bailed on that after 2018. But they're still trying to control what goes on there. And so when the Troika, France, Germany, England, tried to impose these sanctions, they didn't do it correctly, which is what the president of the UN Security Council is saying. He said, so we just don't recognize them. So that's the whole ball game. The process is violated. The mechanism for snapback sanctions is not available. If Brussels wants to change the law, they got to start by obeying it themselves. Otherwise, it's once again politics in a legal costume, which is dangerous, according to the Russian and Beijing side. When you're talking about nuclear weapons. So let us proceed,
Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. I echo, this is Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English. I echo the comments of my colleagues wishing you the best of luck on this busy month ahead. My question is about the selection of the next Secretary General. As you very well know, the process begins with a letter from the President of the Security Council, co-signed by the President of the General Assembly. This obviously puts it in your lap should you decide to pursue this month. Is that something that we can expect? And if so, do you have a certain time frame or date picked out that you're thinking about at this point? Thank you.
You can expect, yes. Indeed, we are planning to start the process during our presidency. As you rightly said, it's a joint letter by the President of the Security Council and the President of the General Assembly. It doesn't mean that the letter will come during our presidency. Last time, when when the Secretary General was elected, that joint letter came, I think, in the middle of December. Yesterday, I visited PJ to brief her on our presidential program for the Security Council, and I raised that question with her. She is in full agreement. We decided that we'll prepare a zero draft and then discuss it both within the Security Council and with the President of the General Assembly, and we'll come up with a joint draft initiating the process of selection of the Secretary General. So I hope that by the end of the year, or maybe earlier, we can expect that such letter will find way out.
Michelle?
Thank you, Ambassador, for the briefing and good luck for the month. Couple more questions on the nuclear issue, but in relation to some different countries.
I'm not a nuclear scientist. You have to
President Putin offered the US an extension on New START. Have you received a response on that? And if not, are you concerned that you haven't received a response?
To my knowledge, nothing official from the U.S. administration yet. I understand they were busy with the high level and other things. I remember the comment by I think the White House press secretary saying that they will study it and will come with a reply. Indeed, President Putin came with an initiative to extend voluntarily the treaty, the strategic one, till February 26, provided the other side also abides by it. But we are still expecting a reaction from the side to which the offer was extended.
And then just another quick one on North Korea. The Vice Foreign Minister was here and spoke to the GA on Monday, and he said that denuclearization cannot be discussed. They'll never give up their nuclear program. Does Russia still believe that North Korea should give up its nuclear program and that there should be denuclearization?
You should not be asking Russia whether it believes it or not, but what the official DPRK deputy foreign minister said is a reality in which we live, and that is already in their constitution. So, I mean, you may like it or not like it, but this is the reality. And the reality justified by the threats that the DPRK experiences, because it's not just even a security dilemma. They really feel threatened by what is happening around the Korean Peninsula, by the activities, military activities, provocative activities by the Troika, namely US, Japan, and the Republic of Korea. So again, this is the reality we are facing.
So Russia recognises a nuclear armed North Korea?
I mean, we don't have to recognize it because it's an open secret. I mean, they're not hiding that. Some other countries, I will not name them, but you know the names, that they are de facto nuclear powers.
He's talking about Israel there. So I want to comment on both of those. So if the U.S., if Washington can't even agree to a 1-year extension of START, another freeze for a year, it's all, we know who's to blame for there not being any de-escalation or any nuclear agreements. They the U.S. has been offered this from Russia. Hey, let's get back on this the open skies START. I mean, they've named several of them. Let us try to do something on the nuclear weapons take, and the U.S. isn't there. Then they talked about Democratic People's Republic of China, North Korea, to give up their nuclear weapons. And basically, he was pretty blunt about that. He's like, it's a reality. They have nuclear weapons. Why are they supposed to give up their nuclear weapons if they feel threatened like they do? And he said, why aren't there equal pressures basically to go after Israel, which is just an open secret that they have nuclear weapons, but they're not part of any agreement. Nobody says they should be given. I heard, I watched the fear that I have, and many other people do. I share this fear, and I can't remember. I heard it from someone else as well, but I've thought about it. I think I said it in a month or so ago in a show that I was doing on nuclear technology and who has it and who doesn't. And it was on the Iran thing in July when they were bombing the crap out of Iran, and what they don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons, and Iran may or may not be close to having them. Trump says he destroyed everything. There's nothing left. The Russians say he hasn't, and that's why they're gathering together again to figure out how to make sure it does happen in the near future, while Russia is otherwise occupied in Ukraine. I tend to think that's certainly true. Because Russia can't support Iran while they are engaged in Ukraine the way that they are. So nuclear threats are rising. I watched listened on my drive home today to what is his name? Colonel McGregor, maybe? I forget his name. But he's always speaking about these topics, and I listened to a show that he ran today, and he was being interviewed by another former military guy, officer type, and they were discussing some of these things. And he said, now I have serious problems with blowing up these boats in open waters outside of Venezuela. I mean, you're watching these videos of guys on little speedboats or whatever, and then the U.S. bombing the crap out of them, killing them and blowing them up. You telling me you can't stop a boat and find out what's on the boat, and you just decide that, or maybe you do know, but if you do know, you should stop and prove it. But they haven't done it 4 times now. They're blowing up boats and blowing up people. This is, in my view, not right. Okay, so the way the U.S. acts, and the reason we're going through most of these questions and all of that is, first of all, so you can hear it from the front lines, as it were. And the second is because there's a lot of dispute about who is the good guys and who are the bad guys. And you see some of the questions, they try to twist what's going to happen. The next question I happen to know is about the Gaza plan and and what he thinks about that. Let's get to Gaza real quick.
Wissam, please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Bisan Abu Quick with Al Jazeera Arabic. I wanted to ask you about the plan that was presented by President Trump this week for Gaza. What is Russia's position on it? And do you anticipate this would be part of a discussion later on this month in the Council? And I have a second question, if you want to answer.
I'm pretty sure that will be an issue for discussion in the Security Council, and even before that, before we meet on the Middle East, second part of October, Russia from not even day one, day two, was calling for a ceasefire, and we welcome any efforts that would lead to a ceasefire and ending the bloodshed. That continues to happen. We know that some of the Arab countries and the Muslim countries already gave positive response to the plan. There are still issues that need to be clarified, and first and foremost, what the Palestinians and other Arabs around in the region are thinking about that plan. One thing that transpired immediately is that not many Arabs are very happy with the role Tony Blair will play in the whole exercise, because they consider him the warmonger and the guy who ignited the whole region with the Iraqi war. He was, the staunchest supporter of the U.S. invasion. So let's see. We need the reaction first and foremost. But if the bloodshed finishes and the ceasefire finally comes into force, we would only be happy, because too many lives have been really wasted, lost, killed,
On the global flotilla, there actually news now that they are on high alert because they're reaching the flotilla. The flotilla. We've heard calls to protect them. There seems that there's news now that they are being intercepted or close to being intercepted. If you have any position on that.
Look, I heard that a number of leaders called on the flotilla not to rush with their plans, so to say, not to provoke, especially during this time when this plan came out, and we don't yet know whether it is implementable or not. I'm sure that they have good intentions, but perhaps the timing is not exactly the right one for them to come there.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Evgeny. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Susan Tehrani from WION, India. The U.S. may authorize Ukraine to use Tomahawk cruise missiles under the direction of President Trump under his oversight. Would Russia interpret this as a red line, and where would this leave relations with the United States? Thank you.
I think that has been already commented, in particular by Minister Lavrov, who said that first of all, it's not a done deal. It's not the fact that they really will transfer Tomahawks to the Ukrainians. Secondly, he said that whether transferred or not transferred, it will not change the situation on the battlefield. I'm sure that we will find, if needed, we will find a response to that move if that happens.
Ephraim, please.
Well, I want to mention on that, my line, unfortunately for them, is that you give Tomahawks to Ukraine. Tomahawks will definitely, and Vladimir Putin said something very similar when he was giving his speech, but I thought this anyway, when he was giving his speech at Valdai. First of all, it will not change anything that happens on the battlefield. That's what Vladimir Putin said. That's what Sergei Lavrov said. That's what I'm saying. It won't change it on the battlefield. And the only reason to have Tomahawks would be to strike deep inside of Russia, some kind of a terror campaign. And we're sending stuff over. So all three of these guys, Nebenzya, Lavrov, and Putin, and numerous others too, by the way, have said, if they do that, we already know that we are fighting the collective West. We already know the U.S. is deeply involved. But if you give Tomahawks, they're more than involved, because the only way you can target a Tomahawk is with U.S.-provided intelligence and targeting. And so this would mean that and especially if they're using them to bomb inside of Russia. And I'm not talking about the disputed areas of Donbass, Zaporizhia, Kherson, any of those places. I'm saying that they want to bomb into other places like Belgorod, like Moscow, like Kazan, places like that, where they have been doing it already. So the only reason that Zelensky is asking for Tomahawks is to bomb inside of Russia. And he's not trying to change what's going on the front in the battlefield. He wants to bomb inside of Russia. And so I don't know. I think that would definitely be hands-on U.S. involvement, which is, I believe, to be a red line. You know, that what they want. That's a crossing of lines. And, you know, operationally, Russia has plenty of air defense. Will they be able to stop everything that comes their way? Probably not. They haven't so far, but they've done a pretty good job of it. Ukraine is running out of stuff. There was an article today that said that he was floating an idea of a missile ceasefire, that no more air attacks from either side. And he's basically begged for that today. And, you know, Russia sent over a huge number on the 5th, you know, been bombing the crap out of them all day over there. And the Russians produce, what was those numbers, were at least 10 times as many drones as the Ukrainians, and they're blowing up all of their drone factories and all that. So Ukraine wants escalation. Or, as Zelensky said, you know, well, maybe we take a ceasefire just in the air. And, you know, they had a couple of ceasefires way back in, what was that, February, March, that just failed miserably because Kiev ignored them completely, and Russia honored them, and Kiev did not. And they just never agreed. So Tomahawk should be a bad plan. Both Lavrov and Putin already, you know, framed a response there. Next.
Thanks, Ambassador. Quick question about the meeting on the ICJ. What is it about? Can you tell us something about it?
That's a regular meeting during the so-called Law Week in the UN, which happens this year, starting from the 27th of October. Many legal people are coming from the member states and the international bodies that deal with legal issues, and that's a regular briefing by the president of the ICJ, this time a Japanese, Iwasawa, who will interact with the members of the Security Council on the work of the ICJ. Last year it happened with the current Lebanese Prime Minister, who was the president at that time.
On International Law Week, I wonder what they're going to say about it, because there's been a lot of commentary that the ICJ is, number one, corrupt, and they don't do anything. They, you know, have opportunities to do something that might be a paper tiger. But what he's saying is, well, this is just nuts and bolts administration of the ICJ, but he doesn't talk about the fact that lawfare is rampant, and you know, and the use of this depends on who's asking for it. And so basically, if they're discussing anything useful, maybe it'll be something worth watching. Otherwise, it's probably just a big fat nothing burger. Next question,
Please.
Thank you, Ambassador, and then good luck for your presidency. My name is Yu from Kyoto News, Japanese news agency. I have follow-up question about signature event on October 24. Are you ready for any outcome document like presidential press statement or whatever? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I perhaps forgot to mention it, that we will come with a draft PRST. We already announced it today to ambassadors on the role of the UN in the current world and in the future, the role which is indispensable. I mean, you cannot, you would have had to invent it if it didn't exist. That's clear. And the founding fathers were wise enough to seize the moment at the right time after the Second World War. Yes, we are planning this and hope that we will succeed in coming up with the PRST.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I'm Zahra Hojabri from IRNA, Islamic Republic News Agency. Congratulations on your presidency of the Security Council. October 18 marks the end of the resolution 2231 and the remaining restriction of Iran. What is your view on this development? In your opinion, will all the sanctions against Iran have ended by that time?
I think I already answered that question. For us, Resolution 2231 expires 18th of October, 2025, and we do not see the reasons why we should disagree with that. I mean, for us, it's clear, and I think I quite extensively answered that already.
Lady, please.
Hi, Ambassador. Congratulations for the presidency this month. And the U.S. is threatening with hitting Russia with sanctions. There is a chance that that could be brought to the Security Council if they pursue that path. What would be your position if you are forced to bring up something that is actually attacking your country?
You mean U.S. is actually attacking my country? You mean that?
With sanctions.
These are not Security Council sanctions, so they will not formally discussed in the Council. Yes, we hear talks about sanctions that President Trump alludes to from time to time, but you have to understand that President Trump has, besides international, he has domestic audience to which he has to heed. He said quite recently, that they would be ready to consider introducing new sanctions on Russia if the Europeans will share the burden. He said many other things about the sanctions. Whether that'll be the case, we will see. But President Trump is a special kind of politician. I mean, he likes quick fixes, and this is a situation where quick fixes do not work. So I don't know what will happen to the sanctions, but we've seen them so many that I will not be surprised to see new ones. We already adapted to the old ones, and we live in them for 2.5 years. If something like that happens, I think we'll find a way how to deal with it.
Because I understand.
Well, it's basically a sanctions treadmill. More planned for Europe than Russia at this point. Like he was saying, Trump has demanded that the EU share the burden, and they're going to have, further problems if they put on these sanctions. The sanctions, everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but most sane people already know that these sanctions hurt the people who put them in place more than the people who are subject to them. Arguably, the U.S. is not as bad off as the people of Europe regarding these sanctions, but, it's not any huge damage to Russia at this point. And it's always, one more pack of sanctions, one more packet of sanctions. Well, they're up to 19 now, and it's going to be the 20th set of sanctions. And now they're seizing boats outside of the law, outside of France, in international waters, and France is doing that. So she had another interesting question. I think this is the one that's coming up with new Ambassador Walls.
That they couldn't be UN sanctions since Russia would veto then at the Security Council.
They cannot be UN sanctions.
Exactly, they couldn't be that kind. But it could be a debate about them.
To sanction us, frankly.
But there could be a debate about them. There could be a debate, right?
A debate can be about anything in the Security Council. I mean, we cannot prevent a debate because the Council is established for debates, but it also is established for maintaining international peace and security, which unfortunately he doesn't live up to in recent years very often.
Please.
Thank you, Ambassador. Stefano Vaccara, Ital Press, La Voce di New York. Your foreign minister a few days ago said that actually with President Trump, Russia is able to work better, much better than before. So my one question, then I have another one, is the same thing for you with Ambassador Valls that just came, Mike Valls, the new ambassador? Do you think he's easier? I mean, did you have an approach already with him? What do you think about him?
I had a courtesy call from Ambassador Waltz yesterday. We had a very good conversation. We pledged to work together. As when Lavrov met Rubio and Waltz in Riyadh, Marco Rubio said to him, look, we are two nuclear powers with the ability to destroy each other 10 times or more. And of course, not all we see many things differently, and we have to recognize it. But it's stupid not to talk even about the differences. And there are areas where we can work together, and we will be gladly doing that if our positions coincide. Same I can apply to our cooperation with the US here in the United Nations. You may not notice it, you may see differences more often than agreements which do not become public that we have with the US, but of course you're looking as with your sharp correspondent eyes, you're looking for the differences and for the hot subjects. But we had a very good meeting, and I hope that will be the case during his stay here. To give you an opinion about Mike Waltz now would be a little bit too premature for me, but I liked the way we talked. I like him, and I think that was maybe it's a bit self-flattering, but I think that was reciprocal.
Good. And then it's about the role of the UN. You just say that Russia thinks it's indispensable, but this last week we heard a lot of very important leaders that didn't think like this. First, President Trump in the assembly, he said how he didn't basically had any help by the UN. And I think he was referring to Middle East, but maybe also on the situation with Ukraine and Russia. So at the same time, the foreign minister of Italy here in this building told us, journalists, that the UN didn't help to prevent the war between Russia and Ukraine because, for example, if I had only sent Silvio Berlusconi to his friend, President Putin, Berlusconi would have prevented the war. So my question is, what do you think about this? What President Trump said about the UN? What Foreign Minister Tajani said about the UN? And if you think what the UN really has to do, and especially this leadership, the leadership of this Secretary General, what should do to help President Trump, whoever wants peace between Russia and Ukraine, what should do that didn't do yet?
I think that when referring to UN that didn't help, President Trump also referred to the escalator, broken escalator, and the broken teleprompter. UN, we say UN doesn't help, UN doesn't fulfill, UN doesn't implement. UN is a reflection of the geopolitical situation that is in the world. And it is, to blame UN for it, and what kind of UN we mean? Secretariat? For me, UN is a sum of its member states, first and foremost. Of course, Secretariat plays sometimes an important and often too independent role in the United Nations. But UN are member states, and if member states cannot agree on anything, it is unfair to blame UN for it. Margaret Thatcher said once that if you want to blame UN, go and look into the mirror, because it's about you. You have to blame yourself, first of all, and those you cannot make deals with. Coming back to the previous question, which is related, I think President Trump is the first of the world leaders who said a thing that we've been saying time and again about the root causes of the conflict. He referred to the NATO expansion, which he said should have never happened. He was saying, it is not my war, it's Biden's war. What Europeans are trying to do now, they are trying to make him participate in the Biden's war. And we see it clearly and vividly. President Trump wanted a quick fix in Ukraine, the ceasefire. We've seen ceasefires before. We've seen ceasefires under Minsk agreements. We saw how they were violated the first day they were concluded, which finally led to what is happening today. But again, Trump was the first world leader who said that NATO expansion was one of the reasons why the whole thing started. Yes, he perhaps did not understand very well the root causes besides NATO expansion, because there are issues that were not clear to him. For example, Minister Lavrov was telling me, who was present in Anchorage during the conversation, when President Putin said to President Trump that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the canonical one, not the one that they tried to install instead of it, but the canonical one, was banned in Ukraine, President Trump couldn't believe it. He was asking like 5 times, is it true? Is it true? And that is true. That the Russian language that is a spoken language, not just for the half of Ukraine. Guess what language, say, Zelensky speaks with his closed ones at home and in the office when nobody hears him. You think Ukrainian? You are wrong. There are things that skip the minds of those who look at that conflict very superficially. And I think that Putin, who has a gift for convincing people and getting his point across, said to President Trump a few things that he might have not realized. So, coming back to UN, to blame UN is to blame ourselves for the miserable state of geopolitical affairs that we witness today. We see, yes, of course, nobody likes to lose its dominance that lasted 500 plus years. I mean, the West, nobody of them like the new rising polars of the world, and the world is really becoming multipolar. Nobody denies that, even those who don't like it. And the role of the global South, that it requires and demands to play in the international arena. So we are witnessing tectonic changes in the world. The question is that these tectonic changes should be political and hopefully not military, so to say, because too much conversations about the Third World War. And you see what is happening in Europe today. They are seriously preparing for the war in Russia. This drone wall, the rearmament, people who pretend to be serious seriously speak that Russia is preparing to attack Europe. I mean, this warmongering. You know, when that's like in the old Russian play, that when the rifle is hanging on the wall, one day it will fire, even without being pressed. These talks are not leading us to anywhere where we can resolve these things. And besides, Europe, I'm sorry to say it, I love Europe. I traveled around Europe. Europe is of course culturally very close to Russia, but look at the state of the European politics today. I mean, they are miserable, simply miserable. Where are these people? Where are the giants of politics? Like, I mean, you may have agreed with them, you may have disagreed with them, but people the caliber of Churchill, De Gaulle, Giscard d'Estaing, Kohl, they don't exist anymore. These are all dwarfs. Who, besides everything, they stupidly refuse to engage with Russia, thinking that they can solve it themselves, but they're not solving them themselves. They're still looking across the ocean. Whatever comes out of they will follow. And indeed, after Anchorage, after there were some signs on the horizon that the conflict may take a positive turn, they rushed to the White House to convince Trump that it shouldn't be done, and that he should continue to make Trump engage in what he calls Biden.
Ambassador, wasn't that interesting that there? I say this: the age of diplomacy is dead. Here's Nebenzya sitting there in response to a question, and he got pretty. Poetic about the whole thing. That was a long answer to this question about Mike Waltz, about blaming the UN, about whether it's, everybody's saying bad things about the UN. He was very positive about the UN. He was very positive about Europe. He was very positive about Mike Waltz and working with him and saying that we could work together. And then he pointed out that the people that are leading Europe aren't of the caliber that used to exist. That now these are dwarfs. I mean, that's whether you want to take that as he was talking about the giants of Charles de Gaulle, a couple other ones, and then but all the rest of them are just nothing but dwarfs. And frankly, he's right. I mean, if you watch the jokers that are over there now doing anything, who the hell is Ursula von der Leyen? She's dumb as a box of rocks. It's crazy the things that she says. The what is her name? Verbuck, who 360. She wants to do a 360 turn, a 360 turn. You're facing the same damn direction. I mean, these are dwarfs, and he's pointing it out. There's only a few more minutes, so we'll get going on there. But I mean, the UN plus the Secretariat and its members in Europe and the days of Charles de Gaulle are definitely gone. And today's class, they outsource their strategy and ignore everything and make a phone call to the US, and then they scare their public up. And then they can't make their own moves. They want to be nationalist, and the people are wanting to be nationalists. They don't want to be involved in all this stuff. Hey, the only reason we're not like them is because we're not close. We're not as close to them, but we might be, because we're certainly lied to by our government. And so I don't know. It's and we have dwarfs as well. Where are our giants? Where are our giants of diplomacy? They just, in my view, do not exist. Let's get on to the next question.
So just because you didn't answer one question, if you thought Berlusconi, the friend of President Putin, because let's remember that Berlusconi wanted Russia in the NATO, within the NATO. And then, this is my personal opinion, I think Russia is Europe. I mean, when I was going to school, all through elementary and so on, I learned in Italy that Russia is, at least the European Russia, if you don't go too far away in Asia, but it's part of Europe. So for me, it's not good when you say, I went to Europe, I went around. I think that you should say, we are part of Europe too.
Now, that's an interesting question, and frankly, Putin said something about this in his presentation about how, we should be part of NATO, and why aren't we part of NATO? And listen to how he responds here.
There was a Russia-EU summit once in Vladivostok. Dmitry knows it better because he was dealing with that. And I do not recall who was then at the head of the European Union when there was this summit there in Vladivostok, which is Far East. And he was saying, I cannot believe it. I'm in the Far East in Vladivostok, but I feel myself in Europe. Partly an answer to your question. On Berlusconi, look, I think Berlusconi is an intelligent man, despite being very charismatic and a character. And I don't think he would try to convince President Putin in the things that President Putin is convinced himself. I think that it's much more probable that President Putin would have convinced Berlusconi about his position than otherwise.
Lenka, please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Good luck with your presidency. Further on the cooperation with the new U.S. Ambassador White-Maltz, if you may, we are just very curious. I know it's a bit forward-looking, but what are the areas you expect to see that you can cooperate on? We know that the Foreign Minister Lavrov said some of the areas are, for example, energy and space. But what are the areas you foresee in the Security Council? Thank you.
I'm not directly responsible for energy or space exploration, but here in the UN there are, across the board, first of all, we cooperate. Cooperation doesn't mean agreement all the time. But one thing which comes to mind immediately is Syria. We are both pen holders on the Syrian file with the US, a long time. Secondly, we have many things in common on the understanding of the say, energy transition. I like the US position, common sense position on the gender issues, on climate. Perhaps it's a little bit too radical how President Trump presented it, but in essence, you cannot make an idol of that thing. As he rightly said, there was a climate. How did they call it? Not him, but it was a term. Climate weather. I forgot the name, but I mean, even the term climate change appeared. Sorry, he did call it a scam, but I'm not talking about the scam. I say that even the term climate change surfaced quite recently in the discussions. There are many things that Americans are taking very common sense wise, and that is something that we can always cooperate with them on. In the Security Council, again, I mean, one thing where we differ with them in the Council, and not just us, but I think the rest of the Council, is the situation in Gaza, of course, and in the Middle East, how they see it. Let's see what will happen out of the recent President Trump's plan on Gaza. Hopefully, it will work. But before that, you know that they vetoed resolutions on Gaza, which were humanitarian, which called for what they always insisted on the release of the hostages, etc. They still vetoed it. Perhaps, hopefully, President Trump's plan will make a difference. There are other issues which. In fact, all the issues in the Security Council we discuss with the Americans. They cannot avoid it. We cannot avoid it. So cooperation is across the board. The question is not on all the questions we come to an agreement.
Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for all the questions.
And that was the end of presentation. I wanted to say, that was a pretty well done press conference, and he answered quite a bit of questions. I mean, there's a lot that he talked about. Europe is very culturally close to Russia, but its current politics are miserable. The constant war prep rhetoric, drone rearmament, Russia's going to attack Europe, all of these idiotic statements that they're making. It's risking what how do you like the one that Chekhov, who was a important writer, talking about this story of the rifle, that if a rifle hangs on the wall long enough, it might fire. And so many leaders prefer these threats to facing their own internal decline. And one of the key things that he said, that Lavrov said, that Putin said, and many other people are starting to be more vocal about, not that it's there. He said, multipolarity is real, whether they like it or not. And so, the global south, your Africa, your Far East, in Asia, these are, the population boom is huge. And there are people, quite a few countries, quickly approaching, points where they don't want to be dictated to by the U.S. and the West. And I think we need a complete revisit of the way that our country approaches the world, the way that we approach the world, with a cooperative frame of mind instead of we're going to tell you what to do and you better do it or else. With rules, I hate this everywhere in the United States, and everything we do, you impose rules that others have to follow, but never you. You don't have to follow those rules. And so I dislike that fact. It's seriously frustrating that it is true. And so, well, that gives us about a half an hour to go discuss Vladimir Vladimirovich. In his, I won't be able to play because it's all in Russian, of course. But I want to get to the questions that he talked about. And perhaps, there were... I didn't take good notes because I was driving at the time, or riding on my bicycle, one of the two, because I listened to the entire 3-hour and 40-minute or 50-minute his speech, and then all of the questions. And basically, his topic map went this way, and you heard some of it because I told you about it. It's basically the world has tipped into a polycentric order, and it's going very, very fast. We live in a time when everything changes radically, and the new environment is open, dynamic, and more democratic. we need broad agreements and durable solutions. Multipolarity emerged because hegemony and hegemonic projects failed. The push to build one hierarchy under Western leadership failed, and the historical answer is going to continue to be multipolarity. But even Vladimir Putin said that we should keep the UN. We should reform it, but not wreck it. And we talked about some of those reform efforts and some of the plans that were out there last week sometime. But he said there's nothing better than the UN. Reform should reflect the world majority, since membership has nearly quadrupled since 1945. They don't want to destroy Russia doesn't want to destroy the institution's core meaning, but it needs to be something for everyone and not just a set of rules that apply to others, but not the select few. So they are talking about it, and quite a few other countries are talking about reform in the UN as well. They're going to have to do something because membership has quadrupled, and though there are people who, aren't necessarily well represented in there, and they want decisions to be made a little differently. He wants to return to classical diplomacy and respectful bargaining, patience, nonlinear solution with Western monologues, teaching everyone what they have to do, and then ordering them that they must do it. And this has worsened conflicts and resulted in many humanitarian catastrophes. He says that the navigating beacons, and this was very interesting. He's like a poetry guy. At one point, he read a poetry piece from I forget who wrote it. A famous Russian writer whose name it might show up in my notes here at some point. But he was reading about it was written in the 1800s, but the application to today is identical with what's going on with Europe. And he's going, look, these are historic battles that have gone on for hundreds of years. And, the rise and fall of various types of countries. He said, Russia, we've been here for 1,000 years. And a lot of these other countries have been around for 1,000 years too. And these are still common themes. And he said that the navigational beacon, and this is interesting because he says that the way to address the issues of multipolarity are culture, history, religion, and geography. Where you are, how you grew up, what your culture is what shapes civilization, and you have to respect your own national traditions. It's the first condition for a stable relationship. And attempts to impose a universal model, they just don't work. The Soviet Union didn't work because they were trying to impose that sort of model, and he acknowledged that. He said that the EU is trying to do some similar things, but these are failing or have failed. And the superficial, the imposed, isn't, the things that are forced upon you, they don't last for long. And so, he spoke about sanctions and strategic defeat. That Russia is a record holder for sanctions. We covered some of that last Thursday, yeah. And yet the efforts didn't cause a collapse in Russia. In fact, they suffered a complete collapse in other parts of the people who imposed them. The world balance cannot be built without Russia, he said. Economically, strategically, culturally, and logistically, it's time to calm down and deal with reality. Reality is reality. You got to deal with it at some point. And he said, Russian security is indivisible, and a bloc logic like the EU is obsolete, or NATO, or Warsaw Pact. He said overextension, regime change, bloc coercion, they produce, which is all the West does, is they produce instability and domestic backlash in the West. Bans do not work. You tell me I can't watch something in Russian because it's made in Russia. I'm going to go twice as hard to find out how to watch something made in Russia. I mean, it's nonsense. And Russia is a beautiful country, beautiful people. They're talking about these backlashes. There's no a counterforce will always appear, and that's usually with people who are reasonable once you've told them so many lies. The world majority, practices something different than what Russia wishes to engage in. He wants, he calls for the world majority like he's speaking about China, Russia, India. He even gave some answers in some of the questions where he was talking about Russia, India, China, like I did a couple of weeks ago, I think, in one of these deep dive 2-hour shows. And he talked about it too. He said the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and other regional bodies are succeeding by consensus, not by subjugation or subordination. And a new wave of decolonization is maturing political, economic, and cultural sovereignty in a lot of countries. He gave a little blurb on Ukraine, why it happened, and an alternative path. He says the tragedy was definitely avoidable. Kiev has been turned into a tool of the U.S. and NATO to fight Russia. NATO was inching to Russia's borders. Donbass was ignored after the 2014 coup. A real multipolar process would have localized and balanced the conflict. And he talked about all kinds of things about what is going on in the modern warfare, because it's all technically driven, and morale and identity of who you are as a soldier still win. He talked about the tools of information and political pressure they think on the West matter more to them, but drones and electronic warfare are change tactics. But the internal cohesion, youth in Russia, he means, that the youth are proudly embracing some of their own traditions, is blunting external manipulation. Russia being isolated purposefully, financially, culturally, sports, politics, name it. You're doing the virtue signaling all over Europe, and in a lot of respects all over America, to say Russia bad, everybody else good, and there's nothing good that Russia can do. And he said that this isolation, if you want to call it that he disagrees with it for a number of reasons, but that the youth are embracing, their own history and Russia. They want to be part of the world too, but it's it's since they're being kept out, they're embracing their togetherness all the more, is what I'm saying. Excuse me. Under this question and answers, and then when he got to the question answers, he spoke a long time, and I'm going to try to get to. I think I can get through most of these questions, because there was only like 20 of them or something, even though he spoke for several hours. And these questions, so the speech was almost an hour, and then he was on for nearly 4 hours. What I have done is I've gone through all these questions, and I can't play them like I did for Nebenzya, but I can tell you a little bit about my take on these questions, and I think I really can get it done if I spend a minute on each one, right? Because we got about 20 minutes left to go in the show. And on the question and answer period, he was asked about, his question was about Finland and Sweden joining NATO, plus the Shadow Fleet and Baltic incidents, and the French boarding a Russian, well, it's not even Russian, what they call a Shadow Fleet vessel that's full of Russian oil, and what's going to happen. So what's Moscow's reaction on this Nordic accession into NATO and the cleanup pressure on maritime traffic? And he called it nonsense. He said it was just nonsense. There had never been any problems with Finland or Sweden. Neutrality gave them a great deal of clout. In fact, that they were very trusted. It was called the Helsinki Act, and that they were very trusted groups. That in Finland, especially across the border, everybody spoke Russian anyway. A lot of the border towns had Russian and Finnish language for everything. That the Finns were always coming over to Russia, and Russians were always going to Finland, and there was no problem with border and going back and forth. And now the U.S. is talking putting nuclear weapons there on Russia's border. And now the Finns have started military, they're building a wall, they're building a fence, and they're creating, and this, as he said, this has caused Russia to put a new, whatever army it was, how we have the first Cav, second armored, whatever, that they now have to reactivate the northern forces, another sector, and that they have done it, and then, it's not something that we wanted to do. He said, if you saw some sort of risks, you could have addressed them with administrative or economic steps, if there were problems between Russia and Finland or Russia and Sweden, and there never was, and there never has been. But now all of a sudden Finland is, especially Finland is, building a wall here. But basically neutrality was a pretty valuable asset, for Finland and Sweden. It wasn't a liability. And what did they trade it for? They traded off their neutrality for NATO. What'd they get? What did they get? They lost their top-tier mediator status. They could have, as neutral people, they could have, bridged certain gaps, because people trusted them. Everybody trusted. They were neutral. And so I see it as a net strategic downgrade, as to belonging to NATO when they didn't have to. The shadow fleet nonsense is basically lawfare theater, sanctions, playhouse shows. I mean, it's nonsense. If Brussels wanted real safety, they would enforce maritime law even-handedly instead of inventing certain categories of Russian cargo and seizing them for several days and then releasing them. They're only releasing them. They have to release them, and so they release them, but it makes it more expensive if they hold them a couple of days. So that's what's going on. So the bottom line for Finland and Sweden is that fear politics overrode any sort of practical statecraft. Remember Nebenzya saying that these guys have dwarfs for politicians, and so do we in America. That's me saying that, not Nebenzya. And the citizens are paying for all of this with higher security risk, lost business, contacts, especially in Russia and Sweden and Finland. Nonsense. He then got asked a question about Tomahawks for Ukraine, seizing ships. They're talking about people seizing ships. He called it piracy, and said these guys are pirates. He said, we might have to engage them like you would a pirate. So the question was, what happens if the U.S. supplies Tomahawks, just like Nebenzya? And what about the legality of seizing the Russian cargo ships? And he said the Tomahawk he said the same thing Nebenzya said. He said the Tomahawk is powerful, but it will not change the battlefield. We adapt in Russia, as we did with the ATACMS missiles, and we shoot the bulk of them down. He also said this would mean direct U.S. service member involvement in it, and that would be required, which is basically a U.S.-Russia escalation, and it's very serious for any type of future relations. And he said, if people are seizing our ships, it's piracy. What do we do with pirates? We destroy them. He said, expect a higher collision risk at sea for these types. So I think he's sending a message to Washington that this is crossing a bright red line. You cannot outsource Tomahawks and pretend you're not involved in the war. Also, it's that wouldn't be Biden's war anymore, would it? It'd be Trumpsters. So I don't know. I tend to agree with him. He then got a question about BRICS. What's the goal? What's the momentum? And how about money? He said they were asking, is BRICS anti-Western, and how to keep pace with it as it expands? And he said, this is interesting because I agree with him, and he's pretty consistent in what he says. He said, BRICS isn't against anyone. It's for all of its members. And there's no anti-dollar crusade. Russia's excluded from dollars. The response is national currency settlements, e-payments, new investment platforms, focus on Africa and Southeast Asia. And so they're all trading. And I saw that military guy, I told you I was watching his show, he said flat out some of the same thing I say, that he says the dollar's just going to collapse because of the U.S. debt. And the U.S. dollar is trading at its lowest time in the last 20, 30 years. I don't remember the exact day, but it's nonsense. Anyway, he said, Putin says the BRICS is 40% of the world GDP. That Europe is 23% and North America is 20%. And the trend is getting more and more into BRICS. Crazy stuff. BRICS is where deals are happening now. If SWIFT has been politicized, which it was, everybody's going to go to the more neutral rails. And the demographics of the deep of Africa, Southeast Asia, these are new demand hubs, and Moscow is building infrastructure there, not claiming a colony, and I don't know, it's good stuff. Then he had a question about UN reform versus replacement. He said, is UN paralyzed? Do we junk it? Do we fix it? He said we need to keep the UN, reform it to reflect the world majority. Don't destroy the institutional memories that we built since 1945. It's 80 years, right? He said he wants to save the forum and fix the ratios, but we had some discussion on that the other day. I mean, that's going to be real difficult to get done. But the UN will work best when it also reflects a multipolar membership and a multipolar governance. So Western elites don't hate the UN. They hate losing their monopoly inside of the UN, is what I say. I think that's accurate, too. So European crises and elite hysteria. The question was, are Western economies losing leadership and papering it over with threat inflation? And he said, yes, a lot of them are stagnant. They have huge deficits, structural troubles inside. Elites amplify external threats to distract the electorate from domestic failure inside their own country. And everybody here, remember the old Russia did it crutch, that is always Russia's to blame. This is policy, Western policy cover. When energy is expensive, when industry is leaving, when politicians need a villain, when voters are getting lack of security and a shrinking paycheck, all you got to do is blame Russia. Russia did it. Man, we need to beat up on those Russians and everything will be fine. He was asked about bans, and he said, we'll end up crowbar versus crowbar because bans just don't work. If institutions fail, does raw force rule? He said, over-centralized control breeds a counterforce. Trying to run the world from one capital generates internal backlash and instability in the country that is attempting the ban. Bans do not work. That's, pretty straight. He said sanctions, well, I say this, but from a kind of a summary of what he said in the answer to this question, our sanctions and sermons didn't tame Russia or China. What they've done is accelerated alternative systems. And so, it's generally physics. What are you going to do if one thing happens? You can't just run things with press releases. These are adaptation strategies, and all you hear about is the fact that a lot of huge countries are unloading debt, U.S. debt, and that's not good for us. It's ruining the dollar. And he talked a lot about modern war and internal cohesion, talking about drones, electronic warfare, and info operations are pivotal. And tell you what, he spoke quite a bit on that topic, and it was pretty. They are producing so much in the way of electronic warfare items and drones that I don't think anybody can keep up. And he was talking about some of the numbers. He's talking about the battlefield on the front line. Where does fighting stand right now? He said, well, we're moving forward along the entire line. Cities like Volchansk, parts of Kupiansk, Kirovsk, were there. They're in Konstantinovka. They're engaged in Seversk and Krasnoarmeysk, and they're pushing into northern Zaporizhia. Gives plenty of shares still, that are being held by Ukraine are being removed. Russia is moving along the whole line. Initiative, adaptation, all in Russia's favor, not Kiev's. Kiev's attrition and the impossibility of holding a 1,000-kilometer front line against a larger industrial base indefinitely. They're losing, even with mobilization. They're still losing about 10,000 soldiers a month. They just keep getting reduced, and attrition is gonna destroy all of it. He said, can Kiev fix their manpower shortfalls in negotiations? He said there were 150,000 deserters from January to August. Forced mobilization is failing. None of the elite or their children, they don't have to fight. And Russia relies all on volunteers and urges Kiev to sit down and talk, but they never do. They just continue. They haven't, since July, restarted the Istanbul discussions they started before. That came off as pretty well. So it's an unsustainable burn rate for sure. I went through that with you. And the West is running Ukrainians through a meat grinder to avoid admitting their own policy failure. Any moral policy would freeze lines and attempt to negotiate, but they don't. He was asked, this was a funny question, he was asked about the Ministry of War versus the Ministry of Defense. Does the label matter? And he said, that he gave a statement, said, as a ship is called, so it will sail. Russia has a Ministry of Defense. No aggressive intention toward any third countries. We wonder what they would say about the part of war. And, if NATO expands and calls it defense, it's still forward, it's still attacking. Russia's point is secure borders and quit doing expeditionary crusades. He talked about Gaza and Middle East. How are we going to do this? He said the West's one-side recipes ignore historic identity and they have exacerbated the conflict, and that some sort of classical diplomacy is needed. On the U.S. proposals, there may be light at the end of the tunnel if they're realistic and respectful of the parties. Two-state, end state, and real guarantors, not press conferences, are what I say. Talked about what was discussed with Trump in Alaska, and he said they discussed Ukraine, restoring U.S.-Russia ties, calls Trump a comfortable interlocutor, that he listens, he reacts, and, we argue that these are two adults in the room. He was asked about the Zaporizhia nuclear plant that I told you about. He says it's terrorist-style behavior from the Ukrainians, and, but they're on top of it. Tara Reid is the one who asked the question. I told you about that the other day. Said there are thousands of applications for Westerners that come for values. He cites gender terrorism against children in Europe, and Russia is easing administrative hurdles to enter their country, to move there. And I say people vote with their feet. If Moscow feels safer for families than London or Stockholm, well, that's an indictment on the Western elites. It's not Russian propaganda, because there's a lot of people doing it. So they talked about a guy named Michael Gloss, who was an American volunteer on the Russian side that got killed. He was given an order of courage. He was rescuing his own comrades in the Donbass school. he said that he came there. There was some video on him that he came there because he shared Russians' traditional values, and so did many other Americans. And so the real split isn't Russian-America. It's traditional values versus managerial ideology. It's traditional values versus transgenderism is what I say. And this poor kid, Michael Gloss, he was only like 22, 23. You know, he was fighting for Russia. He ended up dying for it. And but he was always pretty vocal about it. You know, I don't want to be fighting for values that I don't believe in. He asked about he was asked about the EU dying, and he, you know, said basically they're dying because they don't have their failure to accept our energy, the cheap energy in Russian markets, are hollowing them out. He talked about U.S. politics and polarization. Was asked a question about SCO and BRICS and why they need a new platform. He said the SCO started as a border management, and it was matured by consensus, you know, the three. He said BRICS grew from Russia, India, China to meeting a larger, more balanced club. And so, you know, when the umpires picking sides, you form a new league. Function is much better for them when they make their own decisions based on multipolarity and not based on what the U.S. is telling them. I'm telling you, this is exactly what's happening. U.S. nuclear fuel trade. He said that tariffs on Russia, India have been raising prices, but despite that, the U.S. is still the largest purchaser of Russian uranium, and that they you know, they sanction everybody else, and the sanction maths just don't add up in the supply chain. The U.S. has to have these sorts of resources, and they can't get them from anywhere. Well, folks, we're toward the end of the show. There was one or two more questions in there on the Ukrainian crisis. Kiev is an instrument of NATO. NATO is pressed to the Russian border. Donbass was ignored after the 2014 coup. Multipolar mechanisms would have localized tension and forced a balance guarantee. And I don't know, this multipolarity stuff, everybody's talking about it. My name is Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. I'm very glad you were here tonight. Listen to us every night at damradio.com/live. All of my shows are recorded and placed on my website at internationalflavor.com, where you can download and listen to them at your convenience. I hope you all have a